On a sweltering summer night in 1997, the lights went out across an entire neighborhood. It was nothing unusual. Power outages happened often enough. Families lit candles, neighbors stepped onto porches, and children turned the darkness into a game. But for one suburban family at the end of a quiet street, that blackout was the last time anyone ever saw them alive. By morning, their house stood strangely still. Dinner plates remained on the table, half-eaten meals turning cold. The television was frozen mid-broadcast, a face caught in flicker when the power cut. Toys lay scattered on the living room floor, as if the children had simply set them down and wandered away. Even the dog's leash hung by the door, untouched. It was as if time had stopped, and the family had stepped out of their own lives without taking a single thing with them. Police entered, certain they would find a simple explanation, but room by room their certainty evaporated. Clothes still in closets, beds still made, wallets, purses, and car keys all in place. No broken locks, no forced doors, no sign of panic or flight. It was as if the blackout had swallowed them whole. If this happened in your town, what would you believe? Where are you watching from? Comment your country. And don't forget to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear will make you question what can really hide inside the dark. You can picture the street even now. Rows of modest homes lined up shoulder to shoulder, each one with its trimmed lawn and porch light, each one filled with families who knew each other well enough to wave when pulling into the driveway. It was summer July 1997, the kind of season where air conditioners hummed into the night and kids stayed out playing until the glow of streetlights forced them inside. You can imagine the smell of barbecue lingering in the air, the cicadas buzzing from the trees, the faint sound of a radio playing somewhere down the block. Nothing in that scene suggested that one house at the very end of the cul-de-sac was about to slip into a silence no one could explain. The blackout hit without warning. Lights flickered once, twice, and then everything went dark. The hum of appliances vanished. The TV screens blinked to black. The entire street sighed as one, frustrated but unsurprised. Power outages weren't unusual in the suburbs, not during the heat waves when demand surged. Neighbors carried candles to porches, shaking their heads, making jokes. Kids laughed in the dark, turning flashlights into toys. It should have been just another temporary inconvenience. But for the family in the corner house, a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, that blackout became their exit. You see the image in your head, their dinner table still warm with half-eaten food, glasses of iced tea sweating onto coasters. A board game sprawled across the coffee table mid-play. The faint smell of laundry detergent still drifting from the machine in the basement. All the things that speak of routine interrupted. And then the lights went out, and when they came back, the family was gone. At first, nobody thought anything of it. A power outage is a communal event. It makes everyone step outside, share updates, speculate. Heard it's the whole grid, someone said. Won't be back for hours. People chuckled. Neighbors reassured each other. Children ran with sparklers down the street. But behind those closed curtains at the end of the block, something different was happening. But wait, the shocking part comes next. By morning, the house looked the same from the outside. Curtains drawn, car parked in the driveway, porch light still off. Nothing unusual. It wasn't until later that day, when the mother missed a planned appointment and the father failed to arrive at work, that questions began. Calls went unanswered. By evening, relatives arrived, knocking on doors, peering through windows. What they saw didn't match any story they could explain. Police were called. The first officers on the scene entered cautiously, half expecting to find the family asleep or out for a spontaneous trip. What they found instead chilled them. Every room was perfectly intact. Clothes in closets, beds neatly made, a purse on the dresser, a wallet on the counter with cash still inside, dinner plates with food untouched since the blackout. The dogs, leash hanging ready by the door, but no dog, no barking. Silence so complete it seemed staged. Officers described it later as stepping into a paused movie. Everything frozen in place. No signs of struggle, no broken locks, no smashed windows. Nothing that screamed intrusion, but nothing that explained where the family had gone either. Neighbors were questioned. Most remembered standing outside that night during the outage, chatting on their porches. Some claimed they saw faint movement inside the family's house when the lights first cut out, shadows against the glow of candles. But then, nothing. When the power returned hours later, no one saw them again. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. The search began immediately. Police canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen the family leave. No one had. The family car still sat in the driveway, untouched. Flyers were printed and plastered across town. Local news ran the story. Suburban family missing after blackout. Panic rippled through the community. If an entire family could vanish without a trace during something as mundane as a power outage, what did that mean for everyone else? You imagine the fear it stirred. Parents clutching their kids tighter, locks double-checked before bed, porch lights left on all night. It wasn't just a mystery, it was a rupture in the illusion of safety. Investigators tore through the house for clues. In the daughter's room, a diary lay open on her desk, the last entry written in neat handwriting. The lights keep flickering. Mom says it's nothing, but Dad keeps checking the window. That single line set off alarms. What had he seen at the window before the blackout? In the son's room, toys were arranged in neat rows. His backpack lay open on the floor, a homework sheet half completed inside. No signs of a hurried departure. No sign that he had planned to go anywhere. In the basement, laundry sat damp in the machine, waiting for power to return. On the couch in the living room, a remote balanced on the armrest, as if someone had just set it down. The air itself felt wrong, stale, heavy, like time had stopped breathing. But the shocking part came next. When officers examined the fuse box, they found something strange. It wasn't just the neighborhood outage that had cut power to the house. The main breaker had been flipped manually. Someone inside had shut it off. That discovery shifted the narrative. If the outage had been external, a matter of the grid, then the family had been ordinary victims of circumstance. But if the breaker was cut from inside, then someone in the house or someone who entered it had wanted darkness. Theories blossomed. Some whispered that the parents staged it, vanishing deliberately. Others insisted it had to be an intruder, someone who used the blackout as cover. But no footprints were found outside the windows, no forced entry, nothing to suggest anyone had come or gone. The mystery deepened into something colder. The detective assigned to the case stood in the kitchen, staring at the plates of food left uneaten. He later admitted that it was the simplest details that unnerved him. The fork balanced at the edge of a plate, a glass half full, the butter knife smeared mid-spread. He said it felt like the family had been plucked from the room in the middle of chewing. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. Days stretched into weeks. Volunteers combed nearby woods, creeks, abandoned lots. Police followed every lead. Sightings, tips, strange calls. But all collapsed into nothing. No bodies, no ransom notes, no car leaving the driveway. The house remained untouched, like a shrine to routine left unfinished. And then, 3 weeks after the disappearance, a letter arrived at the police station. No return address, no signature. Just 4 words typed neatly on white paper. They never left here. The detective held it in his hand, reading it again and again. If the family never left, what did that mean? That they were still in the house? That they had been hidden, buried, concealed within its walls? Teams searched again, tearing up floorboards, scanning with infrared, bringing in cadaver dogs. But the house gave nothing. No scent. No sound. Just silence. But the real story hadn't even begun. Because as investigators grew desperate, neighbors started to talk about what they'd seen during the blackout. One swore she saw a faint blue light flicker in the upstairs window, too steady for a candle, too sharp for a flashlight. Another said she heard voices outside, not laughter, not fear, but commands spoken in low tones. Yet when pressed, no one could agree. Memory is fickle in the dark. The detective sat at his desk, staring at the diary entry. Dad keeps checking the window. He imagined the father standing there, peering out into the darkness, sensing something that no one else did. He wondered what he had seen. A figure in the yard? A vehicle idling at the curb? Or nothing at all, just nerves rattled by a flickering bulb? The chapter ends with the detective standing alone in the family's darkened living room. The breaker still shut off, the house steeped in the same silence as the night they vanished. He whispers into the emptiness, "If you never left, where are you?" And you're left asking, was the blackout just coincidence? Or was it the cover for a disappearance carefully planned in advance? The letter sat on the detective's desk like a splinter. They never left here. 4 words typed cleanly, as if the person who wrote them wasn't just making a claim but issuing a challenge. He read it again and again, his eyes returning to the house at the end of the cul-de-sac. The place looked so ordinary. White siding, trimmed hedges, a car in the driveway. Yet the words suggested something sinister within its walls. He couldn't let go of it. The police searched again. Floorboards were pried up, drywall tested, even the crawl space beneath the house examined inch by inch. Cadaver dogs sniffed through every corner. Forensic scanners measured density behind the walls. Nothing. It was as though the house was mocking them, presenting itself as open, ordinary, honest, while concealing something they couldn't detect. But wait, the shocking part comes next. When the detective walked through the house late one evening, long after the search teams had left, he noticed something off. It was the smell. Faint but sharp. A trace of ozone and something metallic, almost like burned wiring. It wasn't the odor of rot or decay. Nothing that suggested bodies hidden in walls. It was cleaner, stranger. He followed it to the basement where the fuse box sat. The same breaker that had been flipped during the blackout. He shined his flashlight over the wiring. At first glance, nothing unusual. But tucked behind the panel, almost invisible against the concrete, was a thin strand of copper that didn't belong. Someone had spliced into the wiring, creating a loop that shouldn't have been there. He traced it carefully until it disappeared into the wall itself. That wasn't neighborhood grid failure. That was manipulation. The blackout, at least in this house, hadn't been an accident. It had been engineered. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. The discovery made the detective question everything. If someone had cut the power on purpose, what were they covering for? Silence, confusion, the chance to remove a family unseen, or something else, something stranger? He pulled the case files again. Witness statements from the night of the blackout. One neighbor swore she saw movement in the upstairs window, even after the lights went out. Another described a bluish glow, steady and unnatural, cutting through the dark for just a few seconds. At the time, police dismissed it as flashlights, candles, even tricks of the eyes. But now, with evidence of tampered wiring, the glow took on a more deliberate shape. He thought back to the diary entry from the daughter. Dad keeps checking the window. What had the father seen before the lights cut out completely? Something in the yard? Someone waiting for them? The detective walked outside, standing in the exact spot where the father would have been. He looked out into the cul-de-sac, imagining it dark, silent, filled with the uneasy quiet of a blackout. He pictured headlights that didn't belong, or figures standing where no one should stand. He shivered, but the shocking part came next. For weeks, the police tried to keep details quiet, but the community buzzed with rumors. Kids whispered about ghosts in the house. Parents told stories about cursed power lines, and conspiracy-minded locals insisted the family had been abducted not by intruders, but by forces beyond explanation. One woman claimed she heard a low humming that night, not from generators but from the sky itself. Her story was dismissed, yet it stuck in the detective's mind, especially after hearing about the strange smell of ozone in the basement. The investigation should have narrowed with each clue. Instead, it widened, unraveling into possibilities that felt too large to contain. Still, the house held its silence. 3 months later, the case had stalled. Leads dried up, flyers yellowed on telephone poles. The story faded from nightly news, reduced to whispers over backyard fences. But the detective refused to let it die. He returned to the house often, standing alone in the rooms, waiting for the air to give him something. And one night, it did. As he stood in the daughter's room, his flashlight beam fell on the window frame. The paint there had bubbled slightly, not from heat but from something chemical. He scraped it with his fingernail and the surface peeled away, revealing faint scorch marks underneath. It was as if the frame itself had been seared, but not by fire. He brought in a specialist who studied the marks and frowned. "This isn't normal electrical burning," he said. "This looks like high-voltage arcing. The kind you'd see in experimental equipment, not in a suburban bedroom." The words chilled him. Experimental. High voltage. What had been in that house during the blackout? But the real story hadn't even begun. Because 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. Same typewritten font, same lack of return address. It said only, "Look beneath the floor." Search teams returned once again. This time, they focused on the basement. At first, nothing. Concrete slabs, clean except for old laundry dust. But when they tapped the far wall, one section echoed differently. Hollow. They drilled carefully, and when a chunk of concrete broke away, a cavity yawned open. Inside they found metal shelving, abandoned equipment covered in dust, coils of wire, and notebooks filled with scribbles. No sign of the family. But the room suggested they hadn't been living in an ordinary house. Someone had built a hidden space, purpose unclear, but heavy with implication. The detective picked up one of the notebooks. Inside were sketches of circuits, diagrams of boxes with wires looping out like veins. And on the last page, a sentence written over and over again: "The blackout isn't what it seems." You imagine what it must have felt like in that moment. The sudden weight of 20 unanswered questions pressing down. The family didn't vanish because of a simple outage. The outage was part of the vanishing. The chapter closes with the detective lowering the notebook, his flashlight trembling across the walls of the hidden room. Dust drifts in the beam, settling like ash. He whispers to himself, "What were you building down here?" And you're left asking, was the family experimenting with something themselves? Or were they victims of an experiment that swallowed them whole? The hidden room beneath the house changed everything. Up until then, the mystery had been frightening, yes, but still grounded in the familiar language of missing persons. Vanishing, abduction, foul play. But the moment the drill broke through the hollow wall and the cavity spilled its secrets, the case became something else entirely. It was no longer just about who had taken the family. It was about what the family had been living above without anyone knowing. Police cordoned off the basement. Floodlights buzzed, casting sharp white light across the concrete. Investigators in gloves moved slowly, photographing every scrap, every wire, every fragment of machinery. Dust motes swirled like ghosts in the beams. The shelves held coils of copper, spools of heavy cable, glass jars filled with chemical residue. A box of notebooks slumped against one corner, pages damp from years of hidden humidity. The air was thick with a smell that didn't belong in a family home, ozone and metal, as if the room had once hummed with currents no one else could hear. The detective crouched over the notebooks, flipping carefully through the pages. At first the writing was neat, diagrams labeled with precision, circuit layouts, voltage equations, schematics of boxes connected by arrows. But as he turned further, the handwriting grew erratic, jagged lines slashing across the paper, words scrawled again and again. The blackout isn't what it seems. The blackout isn't what it seems. Dozens of repetitions like the hand that wrote them couldn't stop. But wait, the shocking part came next. Pinned to the back of one notebook was a Polaroid photograph. The date at the bottom read June 12, 97. The night of the disappearance. The photo showed the living room of the house, lit not by lamps but by a strange blue glow. The family was seated at the dinner table, their faces blurred by motion, eyes wide. In the corner of the frame, just beyond the edge of the table, a figure stood. Not clearly human, not clearly mechanical, but dark and indistinct, its outline jagged against the glow. The detective felt his chest tighten. Who took the photo? Why hide it here? And most of all, what was that figure in the corner? Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. The photo was sent to the lab, but results were inconclusive. The image was degraded, the glow overexposed. Some experts insisted the blur was nothing more than light distortion. Others swore it showed something intentional. Something or someone standing in the room when no one else should have been there. Meanwhile, the house became the center of speculation. Reporters crowded the street, cameras aimed at the quiet suburban home that now seemed anything but ordinary. Neighbors whispered about late-night vans that had parked outside in the weeks before the disappearance, men carrying crates into the basement. Some recalled the father receiving strange deliveries, boxes marked with codes, not addresses. No one thought much of it at the time. Now, every memory seemed like a clue they had ignored. The detective dug into the father's past. He was no scientist, at least not officially. His job was at a local electronics warehouse. But a closer look revealed something strange. In the months before the disappearance, he had purchased large quantities of electrical components through his position, many never logged in company records. Where had those parts gone? The hidden room in the basement might hold the answer, but the shocking part came next. Forensic teams discovered a second cavity branching off the hidden room, a narrow tunnel leading deeper beneath the foundation. The walls were rough, hand-dug, reinforced with scraps of wood. It ran for nearly 20 feet, before ending abruptly in a chamber barely tall enough to stand. And in that chamber, investigators found something chilling. A circle of burn marks seared into the floor, as though something intensely hot had pressed itself into the concrete. Around the edges were fragments of glass fused into the stone. In the center, a single chair sat, metal warped, seat scorched. The detective stood over it, the beam of his flashlight trembling. It looked less like a workshop and more like a stage. Whatever happened here hadn't been routine tinkering. It had been deliberate, dangerous, and perhaps even ritualistic. Still, the real story hadn't even begun. Because days later, another letter arrived. Same typewritten font. This time only 3 words. Check the attic. Police swarmed the house again. In the attic, beneath decades of dust, they uncovered a small wooden chest. Inside were photographs, family portraits, birthday parties, vacations. But one set of photos stood out. They showed the house itself, but not as it was. In these images, taken from odd angles, blue light bled through the windows, illuminating the street outside. Neighbors' houses stood in darkness, but this one glowed like a lantern. Whoever had taken the pictures had been watching. The detective shuffled through the stack until he reached the final photo. It showed the family standing in their driveway. At first glance, it seemed normal. Parents smiling, children squinting into the sun. But in the background, barely visible, was a man leaning against a tree. His face was obscured, but his posture suggested patience. Waiting. Watching. The detective swallowed hard. The family hadn't just vanished. They had been targeted, but the shocking part came next. One of the notebooks contained a sketch unlike the others. Not circuits, not voltage diagrams. This one showed a crude drawing of a house surrounded by arrows pointing inward, labeled power flow. Beneath it, in rushed handwriting, "If the grid goes down, it will come." The detective stared at the words. If the grid goes down, it will come. Was the blackout engineered to summon something? To attract someone? Or to trigger a machine hidden beneath the house? Theories spiraled. Some officers muttered about government experiments, about energy tests gone wrong. Others whispered about cult activity, about families lured into rituals they didn't understand. The detective kept those theories off the record, but he couldn't stop them from lodging in his mind. Still, the house refused to yield answers. Weeks turned into months. The neighborhood tried to move on, but every time the power flickered, panic rippled down the street. Children refused to sleep without night lights. Parents checked windows obsessively, afraid of shadows in the yard. The house itself sat empty, its windows boarded, its yard overgrown, yet still humming with questions. And then came the discovery that pushed the case into darkness. During a routine inspection of the hidden room, an officer leaned against a shelf and dislodged a false panel. Behind it, folded carefully in a plastic bag, was a page torn from the daughter's diary. The handwriting was hers. The date was the night of the disappearance. The entry was short. The lights are gone. Dad says stay calm, but someone is in the house. The detective read it 3 times before lowering the page. His hands trembled. The family hadn't simply vanished into darkness. They had been taken from within. The chapter closes with him standing in that scorched chamber beneath the basement, the diary page in one hand, the Polaroid of the blue glow in the other. His voice cracks as he whispers, "What came for you?" And you're left asking, did the blackout draw something to the house, or had it been waiting there all along? You can almost feel the air in that basement, the heaviness of concrete pressing down, the faint tang of scorched metal, the whisper of something unfinished. The diary page changed everything. Until then, there had been theories, suspicions, possibilities. But her words were clear. Someone is in the house. That was not superstition. That was not panic. It was testimony, written by a child who vanished within hours. The detective pinned the page beside the Polaroid of the family under the strange blue glow. 2 voices now spoke from the past. The father staring out the window before the blackout, the daughter writing of a presence inside. He felt the weight of those voices like a hand pressing against his chest. The family hadn't simply vanished into thin air. They had been confronted. By whom or by what was the question tearing him apart. The search turned aggressive. Teams went through every inch of the property again, knocking on walls, probing ceilings, dragging scanners through rooms. Nothing. It was as if the house had swallowed its secrets so deeply they couldn't be pried loose. But one detail continued to gnaw at the detective. The blue light. Witnesses described it. Photos captured it. Burn marks in the hidden chamber hinted at it. But no one could explain it. But wait, the shocking part came next. One evening, the detective returned to the house alone. He stood in the living room, the silence so thick it felt alive. He killed his flashlight and let the dark press in. And then faintly he heard it, a low hum almost imperceptible seeping from the walls. It was the same hum captured on the audio tape unearthed weeks earlier. The same sound neighbors swore they heard that night. He pressed his ear to the wall. The hum deepened, vibrating faintly against his skull. It wasn't imagination. Something inside the house was still running. The next day he brought in an electrical specialist. They traced the wiring again, deeper this time, finding conduits hidden inside walls where none should exist. Wires ran not just into the fuse box but beyond, into the foundation, down toward the chamber below. Whatever the father had built, it wasn't simply an experiment. It was connected to the entire house. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. The notebooks hinted at something larger. One diagram labeled feedback loop showed the house itself as a node, power lines feeding into it, energy redirected, amplified. The word scrawled beneath, grid collapse, saw an access point. The detective didn't fully understand the equations, but the intent was clear. The father had been building something that relied on a blackout. Neighbors recalled seeing him working late into the night, hauling crates into the basement, fiddling with wires. They thought he was repairing appliances or indulging a hobby. No one realized he was wiring his house into something else entirely. The detective began to wonder if the family hadn't been abducted at all. What if they had been consumed by their own experiment? What if the blackout triggered something that pulled them into a place no one else could reach? But the shocking part came next. A local utility worker came forward. On the night of the blackout, he had been dispatched to check transformers in the area. Most were normal, except for one feeding directly into the family's street. It wasn't just overloaded, he said. It was drained, like something had sucked power out of it all at once. He filed the report back in '97, but no one connected it to the disappearance until now. The detective stared at him, cold crawling up his spine. Drained. The word echoed in his head. If the father's machine had drawn the neighborhood's power into itself, then the blackout wasn't a coincidence. It was the event. Still, the house resisted. Weeks passed. The case grew heavier, darker. Files piled up, but none of them answered the most important question. Where had the family gone? Then, late one night, as the detective reviewed evidence alone, another envelope slid under his office door. No return address. Inside was a photograph. This one showed the hidden chamber, but not in its abandoned state. The photo was dated July 1997. In it, the chair in the center was not empty. The father sat bound to it, his face caught in mid-scream, the blue glow flaring around him. Behind him, shadows loomed, indistinct but undeniably human. The detective dropped the photo, bile rising in his throat. Someone had been documenting the family's last moments. Someone had staged it, captured it, hidden it, and now fed it to him piece by piece. But the real story hadn't even begun. Because attached to the photo was a single note. You're only seeing one. The words sliced through him. If the photo showed the father, what had happened to the mother, the son, the daughter? Where were their images? Their records? Were they bound to chairs in other rooms, or taken elsewhere entirely? The detective returned to the house, furious, desperate. He stormed through the rooms, shouting into the silence, demanding answers. His voice echoed back, hollow. And then he heard it, the hum again rising from beneath the floorboards. Louder this time, pulsing. He felt it in his teeth. He sprinted to the basement, flashlight jerking across concrete. The hum roared from the hidden chamber. Dust vibrated from the ceiling. For a moment, the air itself shimmered faintly blue like static before lightning. And then silence. Total silence. He stood there shaking, the hair on his arms lifted, breath fogging in the cold that suddenly filled the room. He whispered into the emptiness, "Are you still here?" No answer. But he didn't need one. The house had already spoken. The chapter closes with the detective staring at the scorched chair, the photo of the father burning in his mind, the note's words echoing, "You're only seeing one," and you're left asking, if that was just the first, what happened to the others and who has been feeding these fragments all along? You can imagine the detective sitting in his office, the blinds drawn, the photo laid flat on his desk under a lamp that hums too loudly. The image of the father bound to the chair is seared into his mind, his face stretched in mid-scream, the blue glow washing the edges of the frame, and behind him those blurred shadows, figures without faces, silhouettes without names. The note that came with it is just 3 words, but it weighs more than the photograph itself. You're only seeing one. The implication claws at you. If that was just one member of the family, what happened to the rest? Were they bound in other rooms, captured in other photos never delivered? Or worse, were their endings so unspeakable that even the mysterious sender decided to hold them back? The question gnaws like acid. But wait, the shocking part comes next. For days, the detective hears nothing more. No envelopes, no notes, just silence, broken only by the hum he still swears rises from the house when no one else is around. He returns often, walking through the basement chamber, flashlight beam flickering across scorched concrete. He stands before the warped chair, imagining the father strapped there trying to hear echoes of the scream caught in the photograph. Each time he leaves, he tells himself it will be the last. Each time he finds himself back again. The neighbors notice. They whisper that the detective has become obsessed, that he's no longer investigating a case but being pulled into it. They're not wrong. His apartment is littered with clippings, diagrams, copies of the notebooks found in the hidden chamber. The phrase "the blackout isn't what it seems" circles his corkboard like a mantra. And then one night a knock comes at his door. He opens it to find a small package on the floor. No return address. No sound of retreating footsteps. Just the package waiting. He carries it inside with hands trembling. Inside is another photograph. This time it's the son, bound to a chair like his father, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with tears. The same blue glow bleeds into the frame, outlining his small body. On the back of the photo, too, the detective's stomach turns. The message is deliberate. Someone is feeding him the story piece by piece, forcing him to count them one by one. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. Forensics examine the photos but offer little comfort. The blue glow overwhelms the image, making analysis nearly impossible. The figures in the background remain shadows. No fingerprints on the photos, no traceable film stock, no clues about where they were developed. The sender remains invisible, yet perfectly informed. The detective begins to suspect the photographs weren't taken by an outsider at all. What if the father, experimenting with his hidden machinery, documented his own tests? What if the family themselves recorded the events of that night? The thought unsettles him. Why would anyone photograph their own terror? Unless they knew no one would believe it without proof. But the shocking part comes next. He receives a phone call at the station. The voice on the other end is low, distorted, almost mechanical. "Stop digging," it says. "You weren't supposed to see them." Before he can respond, the line goes dead. The call is untraceable. The threat doesn't silence him, it pushes him deeper. He returns to the notebooks, scouring for details he may have overlooked. In the margins of one, scrawled beside voltage equations, he finds a single phrase. It needs 4. His blood runs cold. 4. The exact number of family members. He stares at the words until they blur. Was the machine built for them specifically? Was it designed to consume, to channel, to use them in some way tied to the blackout? Still, the house breathes its silence. Until one night the detective parks outside it and watches. Hours pass. The street sleeps. The house looms, boarded windows like blind eyes. And then he sees it, the faintest flicker of blue light leaking from the attic. His pulse spikes. He grabs his flashlight and rushes inside. The attic is dust-choked, filled with boxes and forgotten junk. But in the center, the glow hums faintly from a panel in the floor. He pries it open. Beneath lies a small cavity, wires coiled like veins, a humming device still faintly alive after decades. Nestled beside it is another photograph. The daughter this time. Bound to a chair, her mouth open mid-cry, the same glow pouring over her. On the back, 3. The detective collapses to his knees, photo shaking in his hands. One by one, the sender is making him count. But the real story hadn't even begun. Because days later, the final envelope arrives. Inside is the photograph of the mother. Bound, silent, eyes hollow. The glow consuming the frame. On the back, one word in stark black ink. 4. The detective pins the photos on his board in order. Father, son, daughter, mother. 4 chairs, 4 faces, 4 pleas frozen in light. His eyes trace them again and again until he sees movement in the still images. Until the screams echo in his ears, though no sound exists. And then, another letter slides under his door. This one longer. You wanted answers. Now you have them. 4 for 4. The blackout took them. Stop before it takes more. He grips the paper so tightly it tears. But the shocking part comes next. That night, the hum returns, louder than ever. His apartment lights flicker. The lamp on his desk pops. For a moment the room glows faintly blue, just like the photos. He stares into the glow, frozen. And in the light, faintly, he swears he sees them. The family of 4 seated at a table, eyes wide, mouths open as if calling his name. Then darkness, he collapses against the wall, gasping. The glow is gone. The photos remain. The chapter closes with him whispering, "You're not gone, are you? You're still here." And you're left asking, if the blackout was not just cover but conduit, then where did the family go? And will the same power reach through the dark to take someone else next? You can picture the detective in his office that night. The 4 photographs spread across his desk like an altar. Father, son, daughter, mother. Each frozen in the same pale glow, each bound in the same chair, each captured in the same moment of horror. He cannot look away even as nausea twists his stomach. The letter told him to stop. It warned him that the blackout took them. But he knows that warnings don't come unless there's more still hidden. And so he leans closer. He whispers their names under his breath like a prayer, as though speaking them might summon them back. The obsession gnaws at him. He stops sleeping. He stops eating. The case is no longer something he investigates, it is something he lives inside of. The hum he once heard in the house now seems to follow him. In quiet moments he hears it in the ringing of his ears, in the buzz of the street lamps outside his apartment, even in the static when he turns on the television. The blackout hasn't left the house. It has followed him. But wait, the shocking part comes next. One evening, as he walks the deserted street toward the boarded house, he notices something strange. The other houses are quiet, curtains drawn, televisions glowing, but the air around the missing family's home feels different, charged. His skin prickles as though standing near a live wire. The grass bends against a breeze that doesn't touch the other yards. He steps closer. The boards over the windows creak faintly, shifting though no one touches them. And then he sees it. A flicker of blue light seeping through the cracks. His chest tightens. He fumbles for his flashlight, but when he shines it, the glow vanishes. Silence falls heavy. Still, he knows what he saw. The house is not empty. The next day, he convinces his superiors to allow one more search. The team returns, weary, skeptical. They tear through the basement again, pry open the attic cavity once more, sweep every corner with scanners. Nothing. To them, it's just an abandoned house with too much legend attached. But as they pack up, the detective lingers. He stands in the scorched chamber below the foundation, staring at the warped chair, the burn marks etched into the floor. He runs his fingers across the blackened concrete and whispers, "Show me what happened." Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. That night, another package arrives. This one isn't a photo. It's a cassette tape. The label reads only, "Uncut 2." Hands trembling, he threads it into a player. Static hisses. Then voices emerge. The father's first yelling, demanding answers. The children crying. The mother's voice trying to soothe. And then the hum. Low at first, then rising, filling the speakers. The sound grows until it drowns the voices. For nearly a full minute, the tape is nothing but that hum, vibrating the desk, shaking the lamp. And then faintly the father screams, "Not the light! Please!" The tape cuts. Silence. The detective rips the cassette out, sweat pouring down his neck. His hand shakes so badly he almost drops it. This isn't just evidence. This is intrusion. The family's terror has been preserved, packaged, delivered straight into his hands. Whoever holds these tapes is forcing him to relive their last moments. But the shocking part comes next. The following morning, the detective receives a call from the lab. They ran the hum from the tape through analysis software, comparing it against known frequencies. Machinery, electrical grids, natural sources. The results don't match any ordinary equipment, but they do align with something chilling. The hum sits almost exactly at the same frequency recorded during experiments with electromagnetic pulses in the 1970s. Military tests. Classified technology. The detective leans back, stunned. Could the father have tapped into something he was never meant to? Could the blackout have been the side effect of an experiment bleeding into the grid? And if so, who gave him the knowledge? Still, no one can explain the photographs. Days pass, each one heavier than the last. The detective takes to carrying the photos with him, folded in his jacket pocket as though keeping the family close will anchor him. But instead, the images haunt his dreams. He wakes in the night sweating, convinced he hears footsteps in his apartment, convinced he sees flickers of blue light in the corners of his room. He whispers to himself, "You're not gone. You're not gone." And then one evening his door rattles. Not a knock. A rattle as though someone is testing the lock. He freezes, hand reaching for his flashlight. Silence follows. He pulls the door open. No one is there. But on the floor lies another envelope. Inside is a single page torn from a notebook. Scrawled handwriting, rushed and uneven. The blackout is hungry. It always wants more. The detective grips the page so tightly it crumples. Always wants more. Not an accident, not a single event, a cycle, a hunger. But the real story hadn't even begun, because later that night the power flickers across the city. For a moment, the detective's apartment plunges into darkness. In that second, his window glows faintly blue, illuminating the room with the same light that drenches the photographs. His breath catches. He swears he sees 4 figures at his table. The family, seated, staring at him, mouths moving, though no sound escapes. The light vanishes. The power returns. He is alone. He collapses into a chair, trembling. The hum lingers in his ears like tinnitus. He knows now the blackout wasn't contained to one night in 1997. It still lives. It still reaches. And somehow it has chosen him. The chapter closes with him pinning the new note above his desk. The words, "It always wants more," staring back like an accusation. He whispers, voice cracking, "If it wants more, who's next?" And you're left asking, is the detective merely investigating the blackout, or has he already become its next offering? You can almost feel the weight pressing down on the detective's chest as he walks the street toward the boarded-up house once again. It is late, long past midnight when most homes are quiet. Curtains drawn, the faint glow of television sets flickering blue against living room walls. But at the end of the cul-de-sac, the house of the vanished family stands dark and wrong, its silhouette like a wound against the sky. Every time he promises himself he won't return, yet every time something drags him back. It's not duty anymore. It's compulsion. It's hunger. The same hunger written in the scrawled note. It always wants more. He stops at the gate listening. The night air is still. The crickets silent, as if the entire street is holding its breath. And then he hears it, the low hum, faint but steady, seeping through the boards. It vibrates in his bones. He tightens his grip on the flashlight, steps forward and pushes through the door. The smell hits him first. Ozone, metallic, sharp, the scent of burned wiring mixed with damp wood. He moves slowly, sweeping the beam of light across the dust-coated furniture. The rooms look exactly as they did in '97. The plates on the table, the toys on the carpet, the purse on the dresser. Frozen in time. Yet something feels different. The air is heavier. He whispers to himself, "You're still here, aren't you?" But wait, the shocking part comes next. He descends into the basement. The hum grows louder with each step, rattling the bulb overhead though it hasn't been powered in years. He enters the scorched chamber. The warped chair still sits in the center, surrounded by burn marks etched into the concrete. Dust drifts through the beam of his flashlight, swirling as though stirred by something unseen. And then, just for an instant, the walls shimmer faintly blue. He blinks. The shimmer vanishes. He turns to leave, but a sound stops him. A scrape, faint but deliberate, from the far corner of the chamber. His pulse spikes. He swings the flashlight. The beam falls on the concrete wall. Nothing moves. He steps closer, presses his hand against the surface. It is warm. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. The following morning, he brings in ground-penetrating radar. Technicians sweep the chamber floor, expecting to find nothing more than soil and concrete. But the scans reveal voids, spaces beneath the house irregular, branching out like roots. Tunnels, chambers, cavities hidden below what was already hidden. The detective stares at the screen, breath short. How deep did the father dig? And what did he build under his family's home? Excavation begins. Workers break through concrete, revealing a narrow shaft. The air that escapes is stale, suffocating as though sealed for decades. They lower lights, ropes, equipment. The detective descends first, boots crunching on loose soil. The tunnel walls are jagged, reinforced by splintered beams. The air hums faintly, vibrating through his ribs, and then the tunnel opens into a vast chamber. His flashlight swings across the space. Rusted machinery juts from the walls. Coils of cable snake across the ground. In the center stands a metal frame, circular, scorched. It looks less like a machine and more like a doorway. But the shocking part comes next. Beside the frame, half buried in soil, lies another chair. This one smaller, child-sized, strap still attached, charred at the edges. His breath catches. He drops to his knees, running a gloved hand over the metal. He whispers, voice breaking, "What did they make you do?" Around the chamber he finds more fragments. Torn straps, shattered glass jars, burn marks etched in concentric circles across the floor. And in one corner, tucked beneath a pile of collapsed boards, a box of photographs. He lifts it carefully, dust puffing into the stale air. Inside are dozens of Polaroids, each showing the same thing. The family bound in the glow, eyes wide, mouths open. Some photos blur with movement. Others are clear enough to show the fear carved into their faces. He flips through them, heart hammering. On the back of each, a number. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again and again. as though whoever took them wasn't just documenting but cataloging. Still, the real story hadn't even begun, because at the bottom of the box lies something different. A photo not of the family, but of the machine itself. The frame glowing blue, light spilling into the chamber, shadows stretched across the walls. In the glow, shapes move. Figures not bound, not human, indistinct and blurred, but standing as if summoned. The detective stumbles back, bile rising in his throat. The Polaroid is decades old, yet it feels alive, the glow seeming to pulse even now. He shoves it into his pocket, his hands trembling. He doesn't tell the team. He keeps it for himself. That night, alone in his apartment, he lays it beside the 4 photographs of the family. He stares until his eyes burn, and then, in the corner of his vision, the glow seems to flicker. He jerks his head up. For a second, he swears the room is bathed in faint blue light. The obsession claws deeper. He cannot stop. He cannot rest. He knows now that the machine was not just an accident. It was built for a purpose. The blackout wasn't coincidence. It was trigger, but the shocking part comes next. Another envelope arrives. This one contains no photo, no note, just a key, old, rusted, heavy. Attached is a scrap of paper with a single line. Not the house. The cabin. The detective scours records. Deep in police files he finds a mention. A hunting cabin owned by the father's uncle, 20 miles north in the woods. Abandoned for years. No one ever checked it in '97. He grips the key until it cuts his palm. He knows where he has to go. The chapter closes with him standing at the edge of those woods, the cabin looming in the distance, key cold in his hand. He whispers, "If you left this place, is this where you went?" And you're left asking, what waits inside the cabin? And will it finally reveal whether the blackout took them or whether something else has been feeding on silence for all these years? You can see the detective standing at the edge of the woods, the cabin crouched in the shadows like something waiting. The trees close in overhead, branches clawing at the night sky, wind rattling the leaves in whispers. The key in his hand feels heavier than metal should, rust biting into his palm. For weeks he has been dragged deeper and deeper, from the boarded house to the scorched chamber to the tunnels beneath, and now here, to a place no one thought to check. The note was clear. Not the house. The cabin. He steps forward, boots crunching on pine needles. The air here is colder, stiller. Each breath fogs in front of him. The cabin appears closer, its windows black, its roof sagging with years of rot. He pauses at the door. The lock is ancient, rust crumbling as he slides the key in. It turns with a groan as though protesting. The door creaks open. The smell rolls out first. Dust, mildew, but beneath it, ozone. The same scent that clung to the basement chamber. The same sharpness that burned his throat during the blackout. He raises his flashlight, the beam slicing through the dark. But wait, the shocking part comes next. The cabin is one room, walls lined with shelves of tools, crates, broken furniture. In the center sits another frame, circular and scorched, wires trailing into the floor. It's smaller than the one beneath the house, but unmistakably built in the same style. His stomach knots. The father had not only built his machine in the house, he had tested it here first. He circles the frame, light sweeping across the floor. Burn marks fan outward in spirals. The wood is black and brittle under his boots. Against one wall stands a table covered in notebooks, photographs, reels of tape. His hands tremble as he flips through them. The same handwriting, the same diagrams, the same phrase scrawled in the margins. The blackout isn't what it seems. One notebook contains dates. July 5, 1997, July 8, 1997, July 12, 1997, each marked with words. Test failed, test unstable, test aligned. He swallows hard. July 12th was the night of the disappearance. Still, the truth hadn't surfaced yet. He finds another box, this one sealed with tape. He peels it open, dust choking his lungs. Inside are more Polaroids. Not of the family, not of the machine, but of landscapes, fields, forests, deserts that don't exist anywhere nearby. Horizons that curve too sharply, skies lit with unnatural colors, figures walking in the distance, their shapes blurred, elongated. The detective drops the photos, heart racing. Were these visions captured through the machine? Windows into somewhere else? Or evidence that the family had been sent there? He grips the edge of the table, fighting nausea. His flashlight flickers. The hum returns, low at first, then rising. The frame in the center of the room vibrates, dust sifting from the rafters. The blue glow ignites faintly at its edges, but the shocking part comes next. The glow strengthens, filling the cabin with light. He raises his arm to shield his eyes. The hum rattles his teeth, vibrates his bones. And then he sees them, 4 figures seated, bound, just as in the photographs. The family. Father, mother, son, daughter. Their eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. They stare at him, desperate, reaching. He stumbles forward, shouting their names, but his voice is drowned by the hum. The glow swells brighter, the figures blur. For a moment he swears the machine is pulling him forward, dragging him across the floor. He claws at the door frame, fighting against the pull. His flashlight clatters to the ground, spinning. The beam catches something on the far wall. Words scorched into the wood, carved deep, jagged, "Help us." And then silence. The glow dies. The hum vanishes. The cabin plunges back into darkness. The figures are gone. He collapses against the floor, gasping, sweat pouring. His hands shake as he gathers the Polaroids, shoving them into his bag. He stumbles out into the night, gulping air, but the silence of the forest feels wrong, watchful. He doesn't stop running until the cabin is a smear of shadow behind him. Still, the real story hadn't even begun, because when he returns to his office, he spreads the new photographs across his desk, alongside the old ones. He stares at them for hours, eyes burning. And then he notices something. In the landscapes, those impossible horizons, those blurred figures, there are shapes that match the shadows in the original family photos. The same outlines, the same distortions. He leans back, horrified. The family hadn't just been taken. They had been transported. Somewhere beyond. Somewhere these machines opened, even if only for seconds at a time. Somewhere the blackout was never meant to reach. But the shocking part comes next. Another letter arrives. No photo this time, no tape. Just words typed neatly across a page. You opened it. Now it knows you. The detective drops the page, bile rising in his throat. The glow in the cabin. The figures reaching. The pull dragging him toward the frame. It hadn't been a vision. It had been real. And now, whatever hunger swallowed the family knows his name, his face, his voice. He staggers to his apartment window, staring at the city beyond. Lights flicker faintly across the grid. For a moment the skyline pulses with a glow not from neon or street lamps but something deeper. He whispers to himself, "It's coming again." The chapter closes with him alone in his darkened apartment, the 4 photographs of the family pinned on the wall, the impossible landscape spread across his desk. The note's words echo in his mind. Now it knows you. And you're left asking, was the family consumed by a machine they built, or by something far older that waited for the blackout to open the door? And if it knows him now, will he be the next to vanish when the lights go out?